Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Whyfight production. Today is going to be the very first episode of what I intend to be a 2 or 3 part series, possibly even 4, deconstructing and analyzing the horrific amount of second chance perks and mechanics that have been added to Dead by Daylight over the years, well, more so recently than usual. And the whole point of this series is to kind of give a fresh outsider's perspective, or just a survivor main, diehard survivor main's perspective on why playing killer in 2026 is just genuinely miserable, regardless of whoever you're playing. And in today's video, we're going to be focusing almost entirely on the 9.3.0 update, which introduced 2 of the most insane base kit second chances survivors have ever gotten across the board. That being pallet density and the increase to 15 seconds of endurance straight off hook, aka Basekit Borrowed time. Now you see, a lot of people, when they play killer, they typically worry about exhaustion perks. They worry about dead hard, decisive strike, maybe shoulder the burden, a sprint burst, a vigil here and there. But you see, before the pallet density update, this was still manageable. Especially if you're playing against a, maybe 2-man, right? But nowadays, especially in the normal 1v4 game mode, instead of the survivor bully squad mode, right? That's currently going on right now as we speak. Before the pallet density update, you could play any single killer in, whether they were strong or weak, you would still have a pretty decent chance of winning. And survivors actually had to min-max their resources. They couldn't just run from yellow to yellow to yellow to yellow to yellow. That's another second chance perk we'll be talking about in the future. Point is, the game has become ultimately brainless. And in the background, you're going to be seeing some footage of me in a customs game doing nothing other than counting pallets. I want to see if you guys can count just how many pallets are on this one particular map in this one particular clip, because it is genuinely absurd. Obviously, when you see all of these pallets, and you begin to remember, okay, well, most games, they have either a 2 or 4-man swift, right? There are a few different indicators you can usually see with these swifts, but 9 times out of 10, the only time you're really going to know is when the game really starts, right? You begin to find the weak link, aka the one who's bad in chase, right? Those ones will usually do one of 2 things. They will die almost instantly in chase and have a squad member follow the killer the entire time, right, to save them the moment they get down. This happens way more often than you think. Or they'll just rage quit instantly, which does happen less often, but I've still seen it happen for the dumbest reasons. And what happens because of the pallet density update, killers simply don't have the time anymore to chase, really. They just don't. Because the entire time you're chasing even the weak link, if it's just pallet after pallet after pallet after pallet, if you don't catch them off guard and they're not just running around with their brain off, 2 or 3 gens are going to pop on the first chase. This problem has become so apparently bad that even YouTubers who typically aren't that critical of the game's state have started to speak up. One of these YouTubers being Spooky Loops, who I've watched from time to time. He recently made a video talking about, air quotes, killer anxiety. I personally like to call it killer frustration, because typically when I get games like these, as he mentioned, where you get one really bad chase, or you go against a full meta squad, 3 gens are done, and the game's basically already over right off the bat, right? He proposed base kit corrupt intervention, things like that, and while I do think that's a good idea, I personally have a different view of DBD. I think giving more base kit things to survivors and killers is only going to amplify the problems, right? It's only going to make these problems even worse than they already are. Genuinely, the best thing that could happen is the pallet density is just reverted. However, as I've said before in previous videos, we all know that behavior has actually doubled and tripled down on pallet density, and at this very moment refuses to look back and change it. Right? So that's probably the biggest second chance I have seen affecting my games. It's not dead hard. It's not Sprint Burst Vigil. It's not, you know, live. It's none of those perks. It's not Decisive Strike. All of those can be countered. What cannot be countered, however, is Pallets, and so many of them. Especially if you're playing a weaker M1 killer, someone like Ghostface, Myers, Trapper, for example. They're all very map dependent, and if you get a wide open map, this also ties into the air quotes killer anxiety, aka killer fatigue. If you get a wide open map, it's almost a guaranteed loss right off the bat, because these killers lack mobility. They cannot maneuver around these pallets in a timely manner to down these survivors, secure hooks, and even really stand a chance. So what happens is these survivors, they feel no fear. They simply see yellow from the perk we'll talk about in the future, and there's no fear. And because there's no fear, there's no mistakes. And because there's no mistakes and no fear, you don't feel like a power roll. You feel like a babysitter dealing with a bunch of kids who like just ran away from home, ultimately. Now, Basekit Borrowed time. This is something that, admittedly, I didn't really notice right off the bat. However, I did start to notice very quickly, especially in bully squads, you know, the good ones, not the ones that just try to throw the entire game to make your life a miserable hell. I noticed very quickly in these bully squads, you know, squads that run Dead Hard, Decisive Strike, Shoulder the Burden, Vigil, or some other combination of those four or three perks, I noticed very quickly that they abused this extra borrowed time right off the bat. And even to this day, the fact that a survivor can be unhooked in the end game, you know, when the gates are wide open and everyone should be leaving, and they get 15 seconds plus 10% haste for 15 seconds, it is insanely broken. At that point, the killer, if there's no anti-camp, like survivors on hooks, then why do they get endurance and haste off hook? It makes no sense. At that point, if the game is trying to end and a survivor is on hook, they should be dead. Period. End of story. And ultimately, this entire first part of this series, I really wanted to drive home that Behavior Interactive, they genuinely, especially in these past few years, they genuinely just aren't even trying to hide the fact that they are appealing 99% of the time to the cash cows. While we're here, why don't we briefly mention diminishing returns. YouTubers like Mintskull brought this up a while back before he announced he was going to be taking a bit of a break from the game. Reasonably so. I've done so myself many times. But he mentioned diminishing returns and how he used to defend it because it actually, the developers said they were going to use it to justify buffing perks for killers, primarily, and survivors sometimes, but primarily killers, right? Think perks like Pain Res, for example. If Diminishing Returns is active and you're running a full slowdown build, you can actually buff Pain Res because the effects of Pain Res combined with other perks like Surge and whatnot are going to be reduced, right? So this was the idea, but the problem is Behavior Interactive isn't actually keeping true to that. There have been no significant killer perk changes or updates or buffs really at all in so long. I can't even remember the last time, genuinely. And this combined with the fact that Jason recently had his Deputies badge add-on nerfed, so it can no longer regress within 4 meters of a gen and now 2. For example, Head On, the survivor perk that, you know, stuns killers out of a locker, that perk has a hitbox range of 2.5 meters. So Head On has a bigger hitbox than Deputies badge. Regardless of what you think with the Deputies badge nerf / fix, I personally don't think the whole kicking or activating while a gen is regressing, I personally don't think that was a glitch at all. I think that was fully intentional, seeing as every time you use it, it counts as a kick, right? Therefore, it's intentional. That's the way I viewed it. But that's besides the point. There is no world where survivor perks should be stronger than killer perks. It just makes no sense. From a very fundamental standpoint, in every single ASIM, whether it be Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, Friday the 13th, Halloween, DBD. The power roll has to hold the power. That is the balance of these games. Friday the 13th was very, very close with it. In fact, the only reason that game, quote-unquote, failed is because of a stupid lawsuit that forced them to shut the game down. So, if you made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. Feel free to drop a like and or subscribe. Next video, we're going to be talking more about the exhaustion perks, the role they play in the game, how they've gotten slightly worse over the years due to, well, as we mentioned in this video, things like pallet density and Basekit Borrowed time. And then from there, we'll probably be going into the slightly more, air quotes, niche techs like full totem builds, conviction soul guard, you know, perks that aren't really extremely broken, but are severely annoying to go against and can genuinely cost you entire games. In the end, I hope you all have an amazing day and or evening. Thank you for giving me your time. God bless. Take care. Peace.